Oh, I am. Hey, this is my first time doing a live. Um, my cat died on Friday. My cat, named Cleo. I don't get credit for that name. I was not her first mommy. Her first mom was my friend Pam, who ended her life in 2017, the summer of 2017. That's when I inherited Cleo. But I'd known her for many years before that, as Pam and I were really good friends. I knew her pretty much since a baby. That's right around the time actually when I met Pam. No, that's not true. I met Pam before that. But anyway, I knew Cleo uh, her whole life. But she was my charge, my responsibility since she was about 6. She didn't live as long a life as kitties can live. She didn't make it to 15. And it kind of happened suddenly. All of a sudden, she was fine one day. All of a sudden, she just didn't want to eat. She didn't want to eat her dry food. That's how it started. And I have this nice tiki cat, high protein, bougie dry food, but she became uninterested in that. And then within another week or so, she didn't want to eat the wet food really either. She was only eating maybe half of it, maybe a third. And of course, she began to rapidly lose weight. She ended up losing well over 2 pounds, which, as you may know, for a cat who's only 9 something pounds to start with, that's an enormous amount of weight. That's almost a third of her body weight. Um, and I took her to the vet, and I took her to the vet, and I took her to the vet, and he could not figure out what was going on. And he told me I was going to need to take her to a specialist, which I could not afford. And it's really hard sometimes to get over the fact that money is often the thing that keeps our loved ones from being able to get specialized care that could save their lives. But there's nothing I can do about that right now. So I did what I could. I researched online all day. What can I do for her? I was asking ChatGPT, giving all the symptoms. What do you think this could be? Lymphoma was the first. That was the thing that kept popping up as the number one possibility, and I've dealt with that twice now. Two of my animals have died of lymphoma. So I was terrified, but I felt like, okay, well, at least I kind of know what to expect and some things that I can do early in the. I mean, it's not really early in the disease once it gets to the point where they don't want to eat, but it is still at a place where you might be able to use steroids or various other things that could um, make them have a higher quality of life and extend their life a little bit. So I tried that. I tried tinctures of varying kinds, immune supportive things, and um, tablets, and I changed her food, and I did all kinds of things that I could think to do. I was brushing her to stimulate her lymphatic system. You know, just giving her so much love and pouring hope into the situation. But it wasn't enough. And on Friday, I had to take her to the vet because out here they don't do mobile. There's no mobile vet who can come to your house. We live out in the middle of nowhere. And he helped me. He helped her to leave that body behind that was causing her so much pain. And I was devastated. But it was a different feeling. It's been a different feeling than it was when I lost Little and Slippy, my first two, from lymphoma. That was back in around the same time that Pam died. Actually, it was the winter of 2017, and then the summer of 2018. They died within 6 months of each other. Little, my dog, and Slippy, my kitty. And I wanted to tear my skin off during that time period. I had been a scientist. I had been a person, a logical thinker. I had come from a religious background, and I had completely put that away and decided, no, it's all science. I sort of became a Scully, as I like to say. Very skeptical of everything. Very, if I can't see it, smell it, hear it, taste it, touch it, or there's not empirical data that says that it's real, then it's not real. I didn't want to be caught by, this sort of like snake oil salesman, religious, you know, whatever you want to call it, influence, as I felt like I had been as a kid. So I thought they were just gone, and I didn't know how to continue, because for me, animals are my kids. My pets are my kids. I heard someone say the other day, the only difference between your animal children, I mean, we're animals too, but I'm just going to use the word that way if you don't mind. The only difference between our animal children and our human children is that our animal children won't marry someone we don't like and move away. I thought that was really funny. And I've had people get mad at me before for comparing and saying that my pets are my kids, but I don't have any human kids. And it's fine, however you feel about it is fine. I'm not trying to convince anybody that they're on the same level. I'm not a parent, so that has not been my experience. Well, I'm not a parent to humans anyway. But for me, I love them as if they came from me. It feels to me like they came from me, like they're part of me. So I was in shreds when Little and Siffy died. And there was no amount of scientific, evidence, or, it was just, there was no comfort in my belief system at the time, because my belief system at the time was that this is all you get, what you see is what you get. I was a realist, like I said, very Scully. I needed evidence for everything, hard evidence. And the only thing I would consider as evidence was data, data, empirical, scientific, hard-nosed evidence. And of course, I wasn't going to get that. I wasn't going to get any sort of scientific evidence to say they're fine now, they're, whatever would comfort you in a situation like that. And I had already dealt with those feelings when Cleo, my kitty's mom, passed away. Her first mom, Pam. So thus began what is now an 8 years deep spiritual journey. I didn't know that that's what I was embarking on at the time. I just knew that I wanted to tear my skin off and run away from the excruciating pain that I was feeling. I cried every day. I drove 2 hours to my mom's house every day just so I didn't have to be alone, because my husband had to go to work and I wasn't working at the time. So that's what I did. And I just cried. I cried myself to sleep. I cried as soon as I woke up in the morning, and I cried all day long. And I kept all of their things there, where they had been. And I didn't even wash the clothes that I had been wearing when I took them in to the vet. I folded them up and put them in a drawer with some other things that were theirs, or that reminded me of them, or whatever. But I began to open. It cracked me open in a way, and I began to look for something to assuage that pain. And it didn't, honestly, it didn't even really matter to me if it was empirically true anymore. It just mattered that I was hurting so much, and surely there was not a universe where there would be no way to assuage that pain. Surely I didn't live in a world where you just have to grin and bear it. You just have to bite down on something and just, bear down and just keep trudging forward. There was no forward. I was stuck. And at that point, being a scientist, I had no idea who to ask about spiritual things, or about afterlife, or about, especially not as it pertained to pets, because still at that time, if you'd asked me, do pets have a soul, or do pets have an afterlife, or even is there an afterlife, I would have been like, no, we don't have any scientific evidence of that. And the only person I could think of who I might be able to look to for some answers, because I had heard of his work through some folks I knew, and interestingly through a man who was the who was the head preacher of the church that I was in, who was the director of the preaching school that I went to for a hot minute. He was the one who introduced me to this person, and that was Joseph Campbell. So I started looking at his stuff again, The Power of Myth, and really any video of his that I could find. I started watching his stuff and listening to him, but he wasn't really talking about the things that I needed to know. But in listening to him, I kept hearing this name, Alan Watts. I never heard of Alan Watts before. I didn't know anything about him, but something drew me to that person. Both of these people had already been long deceased. So then I started listening to Alan Watts's content. It was a whole new world. And this was a person who was clearly not dumb. Clearly not a person who's just taken over by whimsical ideas. This was a person who could eloquently and thoughtfully and logically speak on these matters. I consumed every bit of Alan Watts's content, mostly, YouTube type stuff, videos that I could find. I didn't buy any books or anything yet. But I consumed hours and hours and hours of Alan Watts content. In the context of that situation, I started finding other names. One of the other names I found was Ram Dass. I started listening to hours and hours and hours. Like, I would just all day long, that's all I would do. If I had a long drive, I'm putting my earbuds in, I'm listening to Alan Watts or Ram Dass. My whole world began to shift and change. There were experiences that I had had, there were experiences other people had had that I just had chosen not to trust. And because I was listening to these teachers, I was beginning to loosen around that. I was beginning to loosen around the need for empirical data. I was beginning to see that science is only one system of knowing. That it's, and forgive me for using this term because I see that it's problematic. It was a white-centered system of knowledge. Not white as in a skin color, but white as in a structure. It was a Eurocentric system of knowledge. It was a small piece of the puzzle that claimed to be everything. And as a former scientist, it was hard. I mean, I'm still a scientist. That's one of my many identities, but it was very hard for me as someone who had kind of clung to that and poo-pooed everything else to begin to work those stuck hinges loose and open the door on something else, to understand, oh, wait a minute, for thousands of years we had other ways of seeing things, and this science thing is pretty new. It's only a few hundred years old, and it's pretty dogmatic to say that science already understands everything, or that it even can understand everything and can measure everything, and that anything that science can't measure is not real. That's a pretty kind of haughty dogmatic way of looking at the world. So turns out what I had done was just adopted a new religion. I went from being a Christian to being a scientismist. I thought I was a scientist, but I wasn't. I was not just using the method. I thought that science was the only way. I mean, the rhetoric that I used as a Christian and the rhetoric that I used as a scientismist was almost exactly the same. So now I don't know where I stand. I see science, I see its merit, I see the things that it can give to us, and then I see this whole other universe that is completely untouched by scientific knowledge and even by the scientific method. There is no way to apply that to these things. So That is the process that I've been in, that's been unfolding for me for the entire time that I've had Cleo, because my time with her, as me being her mom, began when that journey began after her first mom passed away. And I've learned so much, but this is the first time since that journey began that I've had to deal with another death. So it's kind of like the rubber meets the road kind of moment, you know. And so she got sick, and I kept thinking, okay, I can't look away from this. I can't ignore this. I can't pretend that this isn't happening. This is where all of this work that I've done, you know, I have to finally put it into practice. I have to finally trust it or not, you know. Um, I was asking everybody I could think of who has left their body behind. I was asking Ram Dass. I was asking my grandmother. I was asking my husband's sister. I was asking my mom's late husband. I was asking my aunt, my cousin, my dog, my cat, you know, everybody I could think of. Please guide me. Please help me in this situation, because I'm never sure if I'm doing the right thing, and these old feelings of guilt come up, and like, you know, I feel like inadequate to deal with the situation. We got to the vet's office. I had wrapped her in a blanket. I had her in my arms, and I'm crying. And I look at the door of the vet's office, and there's a vined sphinx moth. I don't know if you are familiar with sphinx moths. I immediately knew of their spiritual significance, their metaphysical significance, but I wasn't sure exactly what that significance was. But I took note of this being on the door of the vet's office, and then I took her in, and they gave her this sedative. And then once again, my baby died by the injection of a pretty pink liquid. And it wasn't super peaceful. You know, she didn't thrash or cry or anything like that. But it's just, they don't like vet's offices. You know, most animals don't like vet's offices, and she was no exception. And I really didn't want her to have to go there. But it was my only option. And I cried, and the vet hugged me, and you know, he told me I didn't even have to pay. He said, you can pay on you call us and pay on Monday. Don't worry about yanking your credit card out of your wallet right now after you just lost a loved one. And that was really wonderful. And as I left the vet's office, there was that sphinx moth again. So I took a picture, and I left with my baby's body, and I drove home through tears. And immediately things started to happen. I was talking to my husband, and I said, if she is still here, I really hope she talks to me soon. And first off, I looked up the meaning of the sphinx moth, and of course it was like guidance through challenges, connection with the spirit realm, hidden wisdom and knowledge, you know, all these things that are right where I am, right what I'm going through, you know. 1018 is a number that comes up for me a lot. It's my birthday, and been seeing that left and right again. Just a minute ago when I picked up my phone, I went inside, my phone was charging, and I thought I need to answer this friend who's asked me how I'm doing. And when I picked up the phone and you know, turned the screen on, 1018. It's on receipts. It's on time signatures on television. It's on hotel room door. It's the number, random number of our hotel room, you know, like it just comes up everywhere. And that has some significance. Maybe I'll talk about that later, but I don't want to get too far off track. So I'm telling my husband, you know, I'm crying. It's the first day after she's died, and I'm telling my husband, I really hope that if she can talk to me, if she can show me that she's still here, that she comes soon. And we had been airing out the cabin that we live in. So I went to go close the window, one of the windows that had opened to air it out. And there was a little tiger beetle right near the windowsill. And he was gray, and Cleo was gray, my cat. And I pick up this little tiger beetle, and I'm like, oh, it's a little gray tiger beetle, gray like Cleo. And I put him outside the window. I don't have a screen on that window right now, and he flew off. And then I immediately thought to myself, I wonder what gray tiger beetles mean, because that happened immediately after I said that I wanted Cleo to talk to me. So I look up the meaning of gray tiger beetles. It's pretty similar to the meaning of the sphinx moths, which I'm sure that happens a lot. There's a lot of crossover and a lot of the same themes used over and over again in mythologies and spiritual systems and that kind of thing. But as I'm reading about the tiger beetle, gray cats are mentioned. I didn't say anything about gray cats. I hadn't even typed gray cat into my Google search at all. I'm looking up tiger beetles, and it tells me in some cultures, gray cats signify, a relationship with the beyond, spiritual, whatever, spiritual realm, hidden knowledge. And then I was listening to a podcast that said when animals get a hold of you after they've passed, they often do it in groups of 3. There'll be like 3 different things. Something will happen 3 times, or there'll be a group of 3 things. Well, guess how many tiger beetles I saw within a day? 3. I'm sitting here next to the garden right now where she's buried, right behind me. She's buried right behind me. And I was looking at the ground over here, and we have a bunch of antlions making their little funnels in the sand. How many of them were right here, feet from her grave, doing their thing? 3. I look up antlions. Very similar line of association. So all is to say, 22 minutes worth of nonstop blah, 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 to say, don't close your mind to this stuff. Don't close your heart. If you're going through something like this, or you anticipate going through something like this, if someone you know is ill, or if you're just even worried about when you have to say goodbye to someone you love, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe that this is true. You don't have to do anything. Maybe just leave room, though, even if it's just comforting to think this way. It doesn't, we don't need to, there's no merit in closing yourself off to this. I know that people, see a lot of value in being a skeptic, and a lot of times you do need to be skeptical about a lot of things because you just don't want people taking advantage of you. There's a lot of people not telling the truth out there to try to get your money, try to get more power, try to get your time, try to get your energy, whatever it is. And so you do need to be aware. But I'm doing this on my own. I'm not paying anybody to tell me these things. I'm not going to get paid for this video. I'm learning all this on my own. This is a direct connection. There is no middleman here. And I just encourage you to leave yourself open to it. If you need help, or you need suggestions, or you want to talk about it, or you're hurting, you can absolutely comment on this video, or Obs Forever said, hi, I like your eye color. Thank you. That's really sweet. My eyes have always been one of my favorite things about me in a life where I've struggled to love myself. So thank you for that. Yeah, just get a hold of me. You can comment here. There's other ways to get a hold of me, but maybe this would be the most direct since you're watching this video, and I'll come back and check and see if anybody's commented. And I could probably give you resources like other YouTube videos or books if you're into them, or we could just talk about it. Yeah, I guess that's about all I have to say. I just wanted to tell you what my experience has been so far. And I probably forgot something. There was one instance too where I was kind of in a liminal state between sleep and awake, and I saw my grandmother, who passed away it's almost been a year. On August 31st, it'll be a year. And she was sitting in kind of a throne-like chair, which is very her. And she cut her fingers off in an accident one time on her right hand, her first two fingers. But she was petting Cleo. Cleo was in her lap, which is interesting because she wasn't a cat person when she was alive. But she was petting Cleo with the hand that lost those two fingers, and they were there. The fingers were there. And she did like this to show me. She was saying hi, but she was doing it in a way like, look what I got. And these are just symbols, you know. This doesn't mean that she exists somewhere with a body that has brand new fingers. You know, it doesn't have to mean anything specifically other than that they show there is this energy that can show itself to you in different ways if you're open to it. Or maybe I'm just crazy. I don't really care. I'm not really worried about figuring out which one it is. I feel comforted. I feel more peaceful 2 days out from losing someone I dearly love than I felt 2 years out from losing Little and Slippy. Or Pam. Or my Aunt Linda. Or so many other people who've passed away. So, let me know if you want to talk about it. Let me know if you want resources. Let me know what you think. You know, have you had experiences like this? Do you hope that you get to have experiences like this? Do you worry that this is not real, or do you think that it? Are you convinced that it is? Just whatever you think. I would love to know. And you know, as I heard from an indigenous leader recently, he said that when they greet each other, they say, "Hello, other me." So you're watching this, and you're watching another you, another version of you speaking to you, and I'm speaking to you from my heart. And I hope that you feel loved. If you don't, maybe I can help you with that some small way. I hope that you feel comforted if you need comfort. And maybe I can help you with that in some small way if you don't. Let me know. I love you, other me. See you later. How do I end this? I don't know.